Oh, and hello. Welcome. It's Monday night. We took a little bit of time off. I'm hyped to be back on the show. I had a little dental surgery, so I was out for
Oh
2 weeks.
no.
Yeah, that's never fun. And talking is, 75% of my job. So I had to get
Yeah.
back on track, and we brought it back with an amazing guest. I'm so excited to introduce our guest tonight. He's written all the cool things that I just love, from Daredevil to Star Wars to honestly the only Archie comics I've ever really been interested to pick up and read. So thank you for that. Alex Segura, how are you tonight?
Good. Thanks so much for having me. And I feel your literal pain. I think I did a podcast the day I had my wisdom teeth out, and I was like, I was probably still on the pain med, so I got through it, but it was not a good idea. So hopefully you're in a better spot than I was then.
Yeah, much better. It was they used like a laser to like open up my gums and it
Mm,
healed super fast. It felt very sci-fi, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Except you get that burnt taste in your mouth for like
Yeah, yeah,
3
yeah,
days,
yeah.
which is
It's
not fun.
not a good thing. But you're through it. You're through the hard part.
Yeah, we've recovered. We're functional. We're here to talk. Dude, you have so many cool projects in front of you, so much that you've been working on, and you have some cool stuff that's coming out in I guess a couple weeks from now as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting to choose where to start, but I'm gonna ask, how much fun was it writing Kiss and Archie? Like that was
That
just
was amazing. Yeah, it was so wild. Like that was I mean, I had written a few short Archie stories. I had just gotten to work there as the publicity guy, but I really always wanted to write. And so I wrote a few kind of classic Archie stories, which were fun. And then the opportunity to write Archie Meets Kiss. It was one of the few times I campaigned for something internally.
oh,
Like the CEO of the company was like, "Oh, Gene Simmons wants to do Archie Kiss." And I just threw my hat in the ring, and I didn't really have a lot of credits under my belt, but I think I'd kind of proven myself as reliable, and at least with a passion for the characters. And so that was a great like crash course. And working with Dan Parent, who I'm good friends with, I was just chatting with him today. Like he was such a great collaborator because I could have written anything and he would have made it look cool. So
I feel that. Dude, that's it. That's exciting. Did you get to like collaborate with Gene on stuff or come up with the story ideas? Do you have to pitch? I'm sure there's a ladder there at a certain extent for what you can and can't do with those characters. Oh, did we lose Alex for a second? Or maybe
you
they
there?
lost me?
Sorry.
Oh, there we go. I don't know. One of us, we're
No, I'm
almost
here.
there.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
we
I
go.
don't know what
Uh,
happened. Yeah.
did you have to like,
I missed your
like,
question though.
did you have to talk to Gene about anything? Was there like a ladder to get certain storylines approved through them as well?
I mean, they had to approve everything. Gene and Paul looked at everything. They looked at every script, and so it was a very gratifying feeling when I got the email from Gene or forwarded to me from Gene that said, "Okay, basically the script was good to go." I didn't get a ton of notes. It was very chill, very easy. Gene and Paul were very gracious. We did a signing with them at Golden Apple, Dan and I. That was so surreal. And we also did an event with them at San Diego Comic Con. They came by the Archie booth and signed with us, so that was wild. And it's interesting because at this point in my career, I've done a few of those where you partner with the band. We did Archie Ramones, we did Archie
Yeah.
Meets B-52s. And I will say that the easiest ones are the ones where you're dealing directly with the artist. And we did a lot with the Archie. It's like a lot of single band one-offs. And the best ones were the ones where the artists were, obviously alive and involved. And you weren't dealing with someone's idea of who they were. And so that's when we got the least notes, and it was very kind of chill and all good vibes. And that was really fun. I mean, they were all fun in different ways.
I did the Ramones one. Was that like a different because you had to approach them by other people's understanding at that point too?
That was, Matthew Rosenberg, who co-wrote it with me, and I've known a long time, and we've been friends for a long time, reached out and was like, I think we could get the Ramones. Would Archie want to do that? And my first thought was yes. And I think the difference is you're dealing with the states. You're dealing with, none of the original Ramones are alive. So you're dealing with people that are looking out not only for the Ramones and how the Ramones are portrayed, but how their individual Ramone is in the story. And so I wouldn't say it was I mean, I think it was just a little more challenging in that we got a lot more notes, but I think in the end result was really fun and cool. So we were really happy with how it all came together.
Oh, dude, that's so cool. That was just like I had to find out because those are just such good books, and
Oh, thanks.
realizing that like I've had them in my collection for so long and getting to interview you, I was like, oh, I have this. This is the guy. How cool! And it's just
Oh,
exciting to
yeah.
finally
Thank
pick
you.
that up.
Yeah.
And you also wrote that series, that question series recently for
Hmm.
DC
Yeah.
during
All
their
along the
another.
Watchtower.
Yeah, cool, great stuff. One, you
Thanks.
got to do Renee Montoya as the question,
Hmm.
and it also resonated because I was also listening to the audiobook for your first, well, one of your first novels for Secret Identity,
Oh, cool.
and just like some of the parallels between the characters and them both having like a Hispanic heritage and
Hmm.
kind of taking an approach on that. I know a lot of indie creators kind of struggle when one, they're trying to do an ethnic character of any sort of in general whatsoever, but also doing a female character on top of that.
Hmm.
And you're very good at writing different diverse characters, and it
Thank you.
seems to come out very just nonchalant, very simple. And so, what's your mindset when you're approaching a series like Watchmen or your novels as well, where you're going into that different character's mindset to actually portray a female character so well inside of
Hmm.
your writings?
Well, I think whenever you're writing outside of your experience, and something I share with Carmen Valdez from Secret Identity and with Renee Montoya, we're Latinx. Being Latin or Latinx is not a monolith. There's so many cultures and backgrounds, and so you can't speak of it in a monolithic way. But Carmen is Cuban American, and so am I. So there was some significant overlap. But obviously, I'm a straight man, and Carmen was a queer woman, and Renee Montoya is a queer woman. So I think what you want to do is you don't know what you don't know. And so you write the best story you can, but you also do it with the understanding that you may get stuff wrong. And so you have to be thoughtful and considerate about it. And that's where like really like reader authenticity readers can be very helpful and give things a read and say, hey, this is a little clunky, or you missed this because it's not your experience. And also, I think it's really important to not try and write the definitive experience of something you haven't experienced. It's just not my place to write those kind of stories. I can write a kick-ass question mystery story, and I can have Renee as the protagonist, and I can make it great and fun, I think. And so that you lean into your strengths. And I think for me, especially, I love reading stories with really complicated female protagonists. And so I feel like I bring that reading experience to my writing, and also just knowing a lot of amazing, powerful women in my life and in my day to day, and just kind of pulling from them and their experience is really helpful. And so, that's really, it sounds kind of simple, but it's a little more challenging, I think, to execute
Yeah, that execution part
well.
on that execution is just one of those things where it's just like I love seeing how people try to formulate it. And I read a lot of indie comics because I
Hmm.
review so many of the books that we get in and that we print. And so I just love seeing the growth between seeing someone being like, you're almost there, like you got it. And then I read
Right.
one of your books and I'm just like, this definitely the editor aspect. It's a big thing about indie books too. I'm always like, find
Hmm.
an editor, find that
Yeah.
someone to just, peer read it so that you get that experience, like what you were saying. You don't want to make a mistake in a book like that to be foolish or, like, over the top, but you're also just like, just find a friend that's gonna give you some feedback, you
I mean,
know?
we
Like
don't know. Nobody knows everything. I mean, if you think you know it all, then you're making a mistake. And I think I love to collaborate, and that applies to not only collaborating with an artist, but collaborating with an editor to say, "Hey, I'm going to pull you back here," or even on creator-owned stuff, like someone to say, "This doesn't really track," or this plot thread is going nowhere," or just even this character doesn't ring true to me. And even if it makes you pause and think and say, "No, I'm right," at least you've had that moment of consideration where you think about something that maybe you on your own would not have clicked for you. And so that's the fun part about comics. And going back to the music example, it's like you're playing in a band with people. You're like really jamming, and the end result is different from what you thought it was going to be on your own. But nine times out of 10, if everyone's passionate and everyone's giving it their all, it's going to be greater than you anticipated.
are you a musician yourself by any chance as well? Do you have, like,
Yeah,
experience
I
in
mean,
music?
I was in bands in my 20s, and I play some guitar and piano, but I'm not an active musician now. Like, I think the bulk of my music experience now is taking my son to piano class, but I love music. I'm a big music person, and so I think about music a lot. I make playlists when I'm writing novels, and I listen to them not while writing, but while working out story beats. Um, so I think about music a lot while writing or in the process of. So yeah,
So that's a key thing too. You said you're listen to music while you're doing story beats, but not writing. And
I
is
need
that more of a
quiet.
just
Yeah.
exactly the
Yeah, it's a
distraction aspect
distraction.
of it?
Yeah, I
Okay.
need quiet. I need a lot. I try to deceremonialize the process of writing. Like, I open my laptop and I'm there. I don't need like to light a candle. I don't need to be in a specific room. And I think part of that was like a lot of my writing started to take off when my kids were very small. And that's a period where your kids are sleeping at any time. You have to kind of deal with so much stuff. Not that I don't now, but I had to be flexible and able to write under any circumstance. So I tried to minimize not only distraction, but like the steps I had to take to get to the writing. So for me, it's like just open the laptop and get going. And I listen to music all the time, but it's just not when I'm writing.
Do you feel like if you made like a kind of too much of a ritual out of it, that's just gonna like give you excuses not to write and to kind of
Yeah, it just
postpone
gives you too many
everything?
off ramps, and everyone's different. Like I remember I was saying that same candle example, and a writer friend was like, "Well, I like using candles," and I'm like, "Whatever gets you to the page." Like, it's definitely just a me thing, and I can only tell you my experience. And everyone's different. And look, if the end result is you wrote 20 books, then obviously something is working for you. So,
Yeah, no, I totally get that because it's one of those things when I write, even boiling down to like the character aspects. If I have
mhm.
a certain song or too much music in the background, it's going to influence like what I'm typing. It's going to influence maybe a character in a certain way that I didn't intend to. And sometimes I'll lean more towards that vibe of that song
Right.
versus like the purpose of what I'm doing in that scene. And it
I
changes.
mean, I've tried it. I've tried it many times and I've learned my lesson. I start thinking about like, oh, who played bass on this track? Or what album is this from? Or like, when was this produced? And you start falling into the trivia of the song, or you start thinking about the lyrics. Like, even like instrumental stuff like jazz, I get lost in the minutia of it. I'm like, oh, this is such a nice little piano riff. And you lose the pot, you lose the plot. You literally lose the plot because you're like thinking about other stuff. So I'd rather have quiet or like some white noise if I'm trying to block out noise from the outside. But I just need to be in the story,
If I
and
get
that's a
caught
me
up in a
problem.
well,
Yeah,
I feel that. I get caught up in bass lines too much. I grew up
yeah.
as a
Mhm.
bassist,
Oh,
so if there's
cool.
too good of a bass line going on, I'm just like, "Man, this is just rad. I gotta just listen to
Yeah.
this."
No, I
Like, and it
admire a good
pulls you
bass.
out.
I mean, the bass is so it's the bottom. You need the
Yeah.
bass. And just from my band days, it was always the challenge was always finding a drummer.
Oh,
It was the unicorn was finding a drummer who was good and reliable. You could always find good drummers, but they wouldn't show up to the second practice.
that
And
yeah.
that's no drummers. Drumming is hard. So oh, you
I
have a
totally
friend
feel
there.
yeah, Booby's been hanging out in the corner
Yeah.
watching the
Oh,
whole time,
cool.
and Seb's is, kinda sharking around me right now. These are the
Oh,
cats
nice.
everyone sees in our segment. That's why I made a show out of them. I'm like, "You guys should show up in every video."
Co-host. Yeah.
I'm just gonna yeah, you guys are just part of my co-working team at home.
Hmm. That's
Um,
awesome.
so, going from comics to novels, it's always really fascinating when I find writers that can do both so well, because in a comic, you're finding a way to play with time and moments, and you could stretch and expand, and you could do all this manipulation with it. And with novels, you really are just in that moment. You're
Right.
detailing everything that's laying out. Is it some relief to kinda do novels sometimes from the constraint of comics, do you feel? Like, what are some of the favorite things that you like from both that you really can't do with each medium?
I mean, novels are very solitary. You're writing everything. You're the director, you're the screenwriter, you're the costume designer. You do everything. You are curating the whole process and the entire experience. You pace the book based on how you write it. Um, and comics are very different. Like you're basically handing off your script to an artist to then be the director, set designer, costume designer. They handle the visual aspect of it, and that can be amazing if you're in the mood to collaborate. If I want to tell a story that I'm very specific about how it should exist, then it's probably a novel. But if I want to play with someone else and I want to like make something greater than my idea, then I want to collaborate and I want someone to bring a visual element to it. And so, and also comics, writing a comic book script is I don't want to say formulaic, it's almost algebraic. Like you only have so many words that can go into so many buckets and so many panels per page and so many actions per panel. And that's just how comics work. It's different language. Whereas a novel, it's this open-ended road that you can write a 100,000 word novel. Is it going to be a good novel? I don't know. But you have no limit on what you can do. Whereas with a comic, it's either going to be a 22 page comic, a trade, an original graphic novel, or if you've been blessed somehow, you have an open ended, like, ongoing series, but those are becoming more rare because of the market. So, it's really up to what the idea how it feels to you. And for me, sometimes I have an idea that starts as a novel, and then I'm like, oh, this could actually be a graphic novel or a comic. And that's happened a few times, but usually it just really depends on how flexible I am in terms of collaborating.
Oh, that makes sense too. Well, you wanna do a solo project, or do you wanna go with the band and do this album
Right.
type
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do I want to do
okay.
something like, do I want to be McCartney in my basement, or do I want to like jam out with the Beatles, I guess?
Ah, that's cool. It's cool that you have those options presented in front of you as
It's a
well.
blessing. Yeah. Hmm.
Like, and so even earlier you were saying like, with Archie, you're doing stuff with the company in general, and you're kind of giving these, attempts or opportunities to write these stories.
Hmm.
How did you break into the industry in that sense? Like, where did you build out of to kind of get these
Um,
opportunities?
I was always a fan, obviously, and I grew up an Archie reader and then superhero stuff. Marvel, I was a big Marvel and DC guy. I found my local comic shop, and then got into Dark Horse and stuff like Nexus, and the Image Revolution was happening kind of around that same time. So I was a big Wildcats guy. And my first professional comics stuff, I was a journalist by trade. So I was an English major, but I did the school paper in college. And then I started working at my local newspaper, the Miami Herald, and eventually I started freelancing for Newsarama, which is still around. But at the time, Wizard was the big deal, print magazine. Wizard would sell more than the comics that were on the newsstand. Like if you got your book on the cover of Wizard, it would spike your sales by like 5 to 10,000. It was like a meaningful bump. So the way I explain it to people now, I'm like, it was the Entertainment Weekly of comics. And even now, there's no Entertainment Weekly in the same way that it was like maybe 15 years ago. But I started writing for Newsarama, which was the main like comic news website. So I brought my journalism experience to my love of comics, and that's what got me in the door interviewing people like Ed Brubaker, Jimmy Palmiotti, Gail Simone, Peter David. Um, and that's how I kind of saw under the hood for the first time and started building contacts. And eventually I used that to get a job at Wizard as an associate editor. And that's where I worked. That was my first like full-time industry job where that was my day job. I was working on the magazine, but then also we would go to the Wizard World conventions as staff, and that's where I kind of got put faces to names to a lot of these people that I knew as email addresses even back then. Um, and then and then I got my foot in the door at DC in the publicity department, and that was really a crash course in a very fertile time creatively for DC. It was like the road to Infinite Crisis and all the stuff that was happening
Oh,
there, and then 52, which was amazing, 1 year later, which was really fun. And so really like getting a front row seat to see how folks like Greg Rucka, Grant Morrison, Jeff Johns, Mark Waid, Keith Giffen, Gail Simone, Brad Meltzer. And so I was really like knowing I already wanted to write. I was the publicity guy in the department, so I was doing that job. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, wow, let me just see how these people do it because I can learn something from them. And that's not just how they behave, but like it's part of it. But also, how does like Brad Meltzer format a script?
yeah.
How does Jeff Johns handle an interview about a comic? And things like that were really helpful to me. And then my publicity background and journalism background were really helpful in just writing to a deadline, keeping things succinct, focusing on what's important and what needs to be the clearest part of your story. So I wouldn't say I was primed and ready, but I definitely was absorbing all that stuff. And I just was waiting for the opportunity, and it eventually came.
Oh, that's epic. I mean, that's so cool. It resonates a lot with how I've kind of come up in the industry, oddly
Hmm.
enough. I started off with websites and reviews, and then it turned into interviews, and then I got in with CWS, and now this is just what I do. I interview people and draw
Yeah, it's
live and
cool.
stuff like that. It's super rad, and I can print all my comics all I want, and whatnot.
Yeah, you have
Um,
free access. I would say, like, I wouldn't say my path is like the clearest or the most direct path. I've met people who start writing for Marvel like out of the gate. Like they just have an indie comic that immediately resonates and they get the gig. Whereas for me, it was like a kind of a 10-year internship before getting there. But everyone's path is different, so
yeah.
I don't regret it, and I think I learned a lot, and I'm still learning.
So, and you do your independent stuff and you do stuff with Marvel and DC. Is
Hmm.
there something you just kind of have a preference for in terms of just like creativity and freedom, or do you like playing with the sandbox? It doesn't matter what they kind of throw at you. Namely because, I think about that question series
Yeah.
and you probably had a lot of restrictions. I was noticing how there was like five other storylines going on
Hmm.
with that one, and you kind of had to play in a certain restricted space. How is that for you versus like, the Forgotten Five, you could have fun. Like you could just be
I think, yeah, it's
bombastic.
totally different. Like you're in a certain, I think you're given the toys, you can play with the toys, but you can't break the toys because they're not yours. Whereas with something like Forgotten Five or other creator-owned stuff, I created the characters or co-created them, and if I think a character should explode and be off the grid, off the story, that's my call. But I think it's just a different kind of puzzle, a different kind of writing challenge. And the only big lesson I've learned is that the stories that I do work for hire, I have to be passionate about the character. I have to love the character. So like something like Spider Society, I love Araña, I love the Spider-Verse, I love the Spider-Man characters. And you see a lot of that on the page. Like you see minor characters that I grew up reading, like Ashley Kafka and villains that I enjoyed as a reader. The same with the question, like Bulleteer is in it. I love Bulleteer, and I love the old Charlton heroes like Nightshade and
Yeah.
um, Ted Cord, Blue Beetle, and stuff like that. So it's really like you have to inject your unique passion into the work for hire stuff. Otherwise, it's just going to read like everyone else's stuff, and that's not what you want. You want someone to be like, oh, that's an Alex Segura story, or that's a whatever story, because you recognize the passion, but also the skill, hopefully.
I mean, I think people get yeah, definitely people get to that level. You think about Morrison and Moore and all those type of people where you're like, "Oh, yeah, this is definitely their formula and the way they put it
Right.
together." And it's kinda cool that you've definitely started to get to a point with that, with everything you've been doing, especially your Star Wars series.
Oh,
Those
thanks.
have been tons of fun, and what a
Thank you.
sandbox to play in with that. I can only imagine so when you're given these Star Wars assignments, is it something like, okay, you have play fun or have fun in this timeline? Do you have like what are the restrictions they kind of give you to come up with the stories? Or is it like a plot and now you're just kind of coasting through the story to explain the plot?
It's different. I mean, I feel like my whole Star Wars run, it ends with issue 10, which comes out soon,
Mhm.
was basically the Battle of Jakku, which was a 12 issue maxi series that was not truncated, but like kind of released over 3 or 4 months, which is like 2 or 3 issues a month, which is wild. And then the traditional Star Wars series, which was 10 issues with Phil Noto and Pete Woods and Luke Ross, and that was 10 issues monthly. And so that was a lot of fun, but they were both very different. Like Battle of Jakku was very much connecting the dots of a lot of existing lore. So you have like the Chuck Wendig novels, you have what was established in the films, whereas the Star Wars ongoing, I'm picking up in a very empty period of the timeline. Like not a lot has been established. So that is in my mind an opportunity to tell like what's the fourth movie. That's how I treated Jakku and the ongoing. Like these are the what if there were two more movies with Luke, Leia, Han, and the crew after Jedi? And so I think the challenge with any work for hire, and I think the bigger challenge with a big company like Disney, Marvel, Lucasfilm is, people are going to look at your stuff. They don't just say, okay, do the 10 issues and then turn them in and we'll be good to go. Like, you need to get an outline approved, you need a springboard approved, and then you also need to be flexible because sometimes things change. So they say, oh, well, we can't use this character, and you're kind of further down the line. Not a criticism in any way, it's just a lot of moving pieces. Whereas with something creator owned like the Forgotten Five, no one's going to email me and say, "Hey, we need to use Leviathan over here." So you can't use her in the next chapter of your Patreon comic. It's just not that big. It's just not at the same level. And so there is some creative freedom that comes with just writing your own stuff, but there's also the fun part of, hey, I'm writing Darth Vader dialogue, or I'm writing Luke Skywalker dialogue that really again speaks to my own passions, and so I'm excited to be doing that. So I think there's always a give and take, and they're both really gratifying in different ways.
And so do you get like an anxiety behind some of that, knowing the criticisms behind like fan bases and I'm sure you have debates with your friends on certain Star Wars aspects and
Yeah.
whatnot, but is it just like I just can't think about that. I just got to think about what makes me happy in this universe.
Um, yeah, it's that. Definitely. I mean, I definitely don't read reviews as much as I used to when I first started out. Like, I think there's a hunger when you're first starting out, like, oh my God, what do they think? And now it's like, I know I have a confidence in my ability. I know I can execute a story. I know narrative and I know the lore. And fans are passionate. And sometimes a story is just not for you. Maybe it doesn't speak to you, and it doesn't mean the story is bad. I've read stories that I can just say, it just doesn't work for me. And it's not that it's not qualitatively good. It's just not for me. And I think the challenge with fandom that is so intense, like Star Wars, is it's very easy to get lost in the minutia and read every Reddit post and you read every review. And I had to really kind of pump the brakes on that myself, because then I freeze up and then I can't tell the story I want to tell. And I'd rather just tell my story, and hopefully people will enjoy it. And I think I've gotten a lot of great emails and feedback about the run. And not every story is for everyone. So there's going to be times that people say I didn't like it, and once I'm done with the story and it's out there, it's not mine anymore. It's somebody else's. Like you're digesting it and experiencing it on your own terms, and that experience is your experience, and I can't really like be involved in that.
And like you said, it's part of one of those things where it's like I submitted my part, I recorded my tracks,
Right.
and now it's the next
Yeah.
person to put their tracks, and it changes so much from your original even concept when you're writing it and putting it down to an extent, I'm sure.
I mean, to me, it's like I got to work with Phil Noto, one of my oldest friends in comics, who is like one of the best artists in comics, Pete Woods, like the
Mhm.
team behind these books, the editors, Mark and Mikey, were great to deal with. Marvel's always good to deal with. So I had a blast. I had a great time. I got to write a Star Wars comic with Han, Luke, Leia, and a new villain that I got to create from Jakku. It was really like it was a dream scenario. So I mean, it is. It's. I hope people enjoy it. That's really all I can say about it.
Yeah, it's super rad. I love it so far.
Yeah.
But
Thank
and
you.
so kind of like, blending that into my next question too is that you're really great at your deadlines. Like you're pumping out stories
Oh,
and
thanks.
comics
Yeah.
and novels, and it's one of those things like you're not getting anxiety or the fear from like fan releases or fan comments or anything like that, audience. But like, and so keeping your own head on track with a family,
Mhm.
with hitting these deadlines, for hitting deadlines on bigger books and stories, like what keeps the mental clear to keep putting words on the page? You kind of cut out rituals. You're really good at just like, wherever you need to be, you got to
Mhm.
write. So what keeps it flowing the entire time without roadblocks? There's a lot going on in the world. I know you see
There
a
is.
lot of
Yeah.
stuff too. Like I follow your stuff. I respect all the things you post.
Oh, thanks.
So yeah, yeah, no, definitely same page there.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things like, a lot of creators at this point, especially indie creators too, I see all the time, is that they want to sit down and write and create, but they're just like, I'm fried. Like what gives you that
Yeah.
clarity to sit down and push it all out?
I mean, I can't. I am affected by the world. I am affected by day-to-day stress and stuff like that, and deadlines. I'm. I just think editors appreciate it when you communicate. If you need an extra day, you tell your editor, I need an extra day. And that way they at least know. I've been an editor, so I've been on the other side and I've been chasing freelancers. And you're like, are you going to turn the thing in when I need it? Or, like I always appreciated it when a freelancer was like, hey, I'm running hot, or I'm like sick, or I'm dealing with this. And then you just kind of build out you just want someone to communicate. And I think for me, um, I love doing this stuff. So, it's not, the old saying is, find work that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Like that's really how I feel. Like I'm doing stuff that I'm really passionate about with characters I love, whether they're my characters or characters that I grew up reading. So it's almost like an oasis from other stuff, like the news or. And I also try in my own personal time to be of service in ways that get me out of my head, and so I'm not doom scrolling. I'm actually doing stuff in the community or with people I admire, and um, that's really what helps me get going. And I think it's very easy to fall into this rabbit hole of the internet where you're just scrolling through all the bad news. And I also feel like we weren't really built for this level of absorption of so much stuff.
Yeah.
I'm of the age where I remember a time where I didn't have the internet in my pocket. I had I didn't have a phone on me at all times. And, sometimes you have to just sit with your own thoughts, and that's okay too. And I'm trying to be more mindful of those moments.
Honestly, those are I try to do the same because I grew up in that same. I don't know
Yeah.
what our age difference is, but I definitely didn't have internet growing up
Mhm.
either. And I even saw a
I've
comedian.
got
He's
more
talking
gray in my beard than you do. So,
slightly. It's the lighting,
yeah.
maybe. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
also, you write more, so there's more stress. I get that.
Yeah.
But like finding that moment just to have like peace and quiet, especially when you're, writing and creating, you really have to just sit on a moment. You have to sit on a
Mhm.
scene and you have to just let things play out. And if you're just switching apps and things left and right, you're going to break that concentration. And I've noticed how much that's affected me just because
Yeah.
it's a day job. I'm operating, socials and you're doing all that. It's hard not to get sucked up into some of that sometimes. But finding a way just to like literally clear your brain and be like, That's gone. I'm done with my phone. This is it. I've done my promoting." I feel
Yeah.
like you do that too. I feel like you post a bunch of stories at once and you're like, "I'm done for the
Yeah,
day."
and then I'm good. I mean, I don't, I think the challenge is you kind of set up shop on whatever social media platform for a given time, and you're like waiting for something to happen. It never happens. So just do your thing, retweet the people you want to retweet or reskeet or repost or what have you, post your stuff, and then like get on with your day. Like I try not to scroll too much before bed. I try to read something and try to like disconnect. And I also try not to be inundated with notifications. Now we're just kind of like talking like social media philosophy, but I try not to get bombarded by stuff. So I like to approach this stuff with intention. So I mute like my social media stuff so I'm not seeing like you have 150 unread messages. Like I'll get to the app. Like trust me, I will go on Instagram, but I'd rather do it on my terms as opposed to like some stress like to clear the red circle. You know what I mean?
I feel that. Yeah, that's not being, a slave to the device, and that's the best thing. And turning off all your notifications, putting away when you
Hmm.
write, and just getting a cleansing for a couple hours. It's crazy what it does to your brain.
For
I'm
sure.
I'm literally just attached to my phone right now because they do Warp Tour announcements every 2 hours. So I'm
Oh
like,
right.
I need
Yes. Yeah. I wonder who's
to
going to be on the lineup. Yeah.
yes, exactly. Well, also, dude, you have a awesome Daredevil book coming out,
Thank you.
and just the concept of it is it's kind of funny that you're writing very visually about like the blindest character in Marvel
Hmm.
history. And it's just the very concept of just like explaining the world behind it through such visceral words about the one blind guy. And I was like, that's kind of funny. That's a cool way to pull off a novel for sure. What did you want to do differently with your Daredevil? Because we all know we all have our favorite runs, from Miller to
Right.
Zdarsky to Wade to everybody. What were you trying to do maybe differently with this book that others hadn't?
It's interesting. That's a great question. I think what I wanted to do was give people who maybe were not Daredevil fans entree into what a classic Daredevil story felt like. And so that for me meant, well, what's a classic Daredevil story? And for me, it's like Matt as a lawyer and as Daredevil, Matt grappling with romantic entanglements, whether it's Elektra or Karen Page, or we needed that. Matt struggling against the Kingpin or the Kingpin's legacy in some way. The Punisher, Ben Urich, Foggy Nelson, all the New York City has to be a big element of it. So I put all that into a blender, and then I asked myself, well, what's the hardest thing for Matt to grapple with? And the crux of the novel is that the Kingpin is dead and Matt is relieved. And he feels bad for being relieved because he's obviously like a guilty Catholic. And so he's like, it's bad to be happy that someone's dead, but he is happy that the Kingpin's off the board. And on top of that, the prime suspect is Frank Castle, who is a quote unquote hero, but is an anti hero in many ways and sees things in a very different way from Matt. And so part of Matt is like, I could lose these two thorns in my side forever if Castle goes away and the Kingpin is dead. But then he's also driven by justice. And as he realizes that this case might not be as, open and shut as some people want it to be, he realizes he now has to interject himself as Frank Castle's defense attorney while investigating the crime as Daredevil. And so that complicates a lot of feelings and it's a lot of push and pull. And it really dives deep into the idea of like, how can you be a lawyer if you can listen in to what the prosecutor is saying to his assistant? How can you be a lawyer that's fair if you can hear the jury's heartbeat and you can tell if they're going to go your way or not? And a lot of that is part of the novel, but also like where do you draw the line? And like where's the line between vigilante and lawyer, seeker of justice? And so that to me are those are big elements of a classic Daredevil story. And I wanted to really give readers, whether you're a longtime reader like we are, I've read every Daredevil comic many times over, or someone who's coming into it from the show, from whatever other path where you've heard of Daredevil and you're like, oh, there's a novel, I'm going to pick up the novel. I want it to serve as like a Daredevil 101, like this is classic prime Daredevil, but also for fans like us, like a ton of Easter eggs, a ton of little nods to canon. And in my mind, I know where it fits in Daredevil continuity. So, it hopefully can serve both sides and also surprise people.
I love that, and I started reading it over,
Oh,
the
thanks.
past week and everything, and it's one of those things where I'm just like, I can't wait to get a physical copy because it's one of those books you literally just want to, like, go through every page, and
Oh, thanks.
it's fun, it's
Thank you.
bombastic, it's not fan servicey, but it has, like you said, it has all the right elements to be like, "Oh, I'm interested to sit down and read a novel of this," and I think that's kind of
Cool.
hard for some comic book readers, you know what I mean? I feel like we get these novelizations of certain series and you're like, "That was almost super cool."
Yeah,
And there's I mean, a
it's
lot I guess
hard.
some it is, it's super hard. I've tried the Kingdom Come novelization, I've tried a couple other ones. That one's pretty cool, honestly, that's a bad
Yeah, it's
example
good.
for me to actually
I grew up on them. I didn't have an unlimited comic budget. So like something like Death of Superman, Roger Stern wrote this
Yeah,
massive novel that covered Death of Superman, Reign of the Superman, and whatever else, Funeral for a Friend. And I bought that because I had $10, but I couldn't buy like hundreds of issues. But it was done in such a cool way. And Denny O'Neil did Nightfall, Greg Rucka did No Man's Land.
yeah,
So I feel like as a fan, and Chris Golden wrote some great X-Men novels, but as a fan, I had a lot of connection to novelizations or novels in comics. And so I wanted it to feel like a good crime novel, but also really connect with fans and feel part of the universe. Like I wanted it to feel like it counted. And I wanted it to feel like if you love Bendis, if you love Miller, if you love Zdarsky or Brubaker, hopefully this is evocative of that kind of story. I'm not going to say it's commensurate or equal to, but it feels like it's in conversation with them.
I would say so because it's a step up from what other people have done with the character too as well, like, it does
Thank
fall in
you.
its own place, and so, like, if you said continuity in your own mind, where does it fall
Mhm.
into continuity in your head within the Daredevil realm?
Well, I don't want to spoil anything, but I think in my head canon, it falls like right before Bendis takes over as the ongoing writer. So, but there's still nods to stuff that happens later. So it's obviously a little off to the side.
Yeah.
And, but it's definitely, it's definitely makes reference to Born Again, makes reference to Fall of the Kingpin. There's some nods to the Anacenti run, obviously the core Miller stuff. And then, yeah, just a lot of the Daredevil that I grew up reading that I was really connected to. And it feels to me like if, again, not equating or saying equal to, but if Born Again and Fall of the Kingpin were two pieces of the same story, then this kind of feels like the third beat of that because I love those stories. And so I
Yeah.
was thinking about them a lot. Not to say that my book is anywhere near them in quality, but
Also, like, do you do that to give you like a starting point to know, like, okay, I'm not just jumping into the dark and some timeline. I'm not creating my own. Like, you're kind of creating an alternate universe in a sense, but
Mhm.
you're not like directly being like, I have to create this entire new world to start this novel. I want to start off from here because that's a good jumping off point for me to start creating the storyline.
The way I treat this stuff, especially work for hire, is if this is my one opportunity to tell a fill in the blank story, like a question story or a Spider-Man story. I wrote a Spider-Man Marvel Zombies story that Peter Parker Spider-Man that I felt like if I'm going to write one 8-page Spider-Man story in this world, like what's the heart of it going to be? Like, and the same thing with Daredevil. Like, if I only have one shot to write Daredevil, what do I want it to be? And in my mind, it was very much like Born Again, visually, like Mazzucchelli, Lee Weeks, like that kind of story that was very like Hell's Kitchen driven, very much about Matt doing a lot of soul searching and having all the key elements that to me make a great Daredevil story, like the conflict with the Kingpin, the conflict with the Punisher in terms of like your morals and your choices and who's judge, jury, and executioner, and the romance. There's a new love interest that shows up in the book, and that to me, Matt has always been a mess, like romantically a mess, like not a good judge of like, not great to his friends, like so driven by justice that he can't think of what to do with his friends. He doesn't listen to them. And so he's very driven, very good-hearted, but also kind of a mess and also kind of sloppy and kind of takes his people for granted. And that to me is like a core Matt Murdock story.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Hmm.
I can't wait to finish it. I can't wait for people to
Thank
check it
you.
out. It comes out in March, I
March
believe.
24th. Yeah.
March
Hmm.
24th. Yeah. So yeah, it was cool to get access to that. So thank you to you and Thomas for hooking
Yeah,
that
of
up.
course.
Great and cool stuff. But so I know we're getting close to wrapping up tonight's episode.
Yeah.
But what's a character you haven't had a shot at that you're just like, I have a story, I have a thing, I just haven't gotten to do it yet.
Oh man. I mean, I have a Batman idea that I would love to do at some point if the stars align. I've written Batman briefly, like he shows up in Along the Watchtower a few
Mhm.
times. I did a middle grade novel for Random House that was kind of based on an animated series, so Batman's in there, but to me, like a comic book graphic novel story idea, murder mystery, like the Batman stuff that speaks to me, like so many, is like Year One, a lot of the Legends of the Dark Knight stuff, like Denny O'Neill's Venom, is one of my favorite Batman stories. I think the Batman Adventures comics are supremely underrated. Like the Mike Parobeck stuff is great. Kelly Puckett, Scott Peterson, and the Tim Levin stuff, like just classic Batman stuff to me. Batman as a detective solving, a pared down world, a very gritty and grounded world where it's not so much, not a criticism. It's not so much like there's 20 people that are part of the Bat family. It's really like Batman, Robin, Gotham is corrupt, Commissioner Gordon is his only like saving grace in the police department. Like those are the tenets that I think about in the same way I thought about Daredevil. Like what are the things that have to exist to have a great Daredevil story? A lot of those are kind of the Batman ones.
Oh, I love that. That's fun. I would love to see what you do with that if you get that
Yeah.
opportunity coming up the line. So how do you balance out your reading to your writing schedule? Because that's always it seems to be a thing too. You are definitely a very, well versed reader.
Thanks.
Especially when you're doing research. I'm sure you had to do a bunch of stuff leading up for the question and for this
Oh,
Daredevil.
for sure.
What part of your day is actually just percentage of reading to get stuff done?
I feel like at the heart of any creative person, like if you want to write, you have to read. You have to read widely. Like I don't read just comics, superhero comics when writing comics. Like I love indie comics. I love different genres of comics, Western crime comics. And the same with my fiction writing. Like when I'm writing a crime novel, I tend to not read crime novels. I try to read nonfiction to kind of drive my own thinking. And the at the opposite, when I'm writing something like The Forgotten Five, which feels very much like X-Men to me, like kind of like a different, like New Mutants, Claremont New Mutants. I did find myself reading a lot of like messy team books like Alpha Flight or Justice League International or Legion of Superheroes. And so, I mean, everything's research for me. So even I'm watching a movie for pleasure and I'm like, oh, that would be cool to use here. Or like I'm watching a TV show and I'm like, oh, that's an interesting use of a song. Let me put that on the playlist. And it starts like kind of going into the blender. And at some point it'll show up in the work. So that's the blessing. Like I can be on and absorbing at all times.
Honestly, that's kind of the way you have to be creative, is just
Yeah.
take everything in. Your diet for what you take in is literally your diet, and that
Yeah.
shapes everything you think and get influenced by. So what you absorb from social media to your reading preferences to your TV, that's all very crucial. You don't want to put just trash in there all the time because
Yeah.
you're
An
just like,
editor
oh,
told me this once years ago, very early on. They said your tastes are yours. Like, so lean into your taste, lean into the stories you like, the kinds of stories you like. Because if you start trying to write like someone else because you're trying to chase a market, you're trying to chase a trend, you're just going to sound like a bad cover band. It's much better if you write the stories that you love to read. Like, write the story you love to read, write the story that doesn't exist that only you could write. That's what I tell new writers. Like, what is a story that you want to write that doesn't exist yet? And then find that niche and live there. And that it sounds limiting, but there's a lot of stuff you can do there.
and so do you have release plans for the Forgotten Five as well,
I do,
besides
yeah. So
Patreon?
the Forgotten Five is the comic we're serializing on Patreon, and we're doing about, I would say, 5 to 10 pages every month or so.
Mhm.
And it's me, Sarah Century writing, Pat Kennedy, Dean Kotz, lots of other artists coming in and doing chapters. And it's basically told in two timelines. There's the past timeline of kids being, their powers are activated. They're already like kind of outcasts and they're kidnapped by the shadowy organization called the Contingency that activates their powers. They go on the run and we start to see those early days, but then we jump forward to the Forgotten Five and you start to learn why they were forgotten and they start to come together again because this evil that they thought they had defeated is coming back. And so that's what's what you see, and you see the two narratives kind of reacting to each other. So it is like a love letter to Claremont X-Men and Levitt's Legion and things like that. And um, so yeah, there are print plans. We are going to do a crowdfunder probably sometime later this year, where fans can help us fund a print edition, and then we'll talk to you guys probably to get it out there, and then we'll see from there. And the hope would be to find a traditional publisher that'll put it out as a trade down the line. But I think one of the things we all wanted to do was create a system where we could tell the story as long as we wanted without someone being like, oh, the sales are low, so we're going to cut it at 5, start wrapping it up. You know what I mean? Like, I think we've all been there to varying degrees creatively, and it's just the nature of the business. But I think for us and this story, we wanted it to have legs, and so we wanted to figure out a way to tell the story without we wanted to end it on our own terms if and when we get there.
That's awesome. That's great. And you know what? We print a lot of Mad Cave books. So, Dick Tracy has
Yeah.
definitely come through us. So, the
Yeah. Thank
quality.
you.
But didn't get
Yeah,
to
it's
talk about
good.
Dick Tracy tonight. Great stuff. Love it.
Thank
How
you.
long are you
Yeah.
on that run for?
We're working on the next arc, which ends with 20, and then we have a bunch of holiday specials. So, for the foreseeable future.
Amazing.
So,
Love to hear that. Dude, Alex, I know we're cutting this a little quicker tonight.
no,
I don't
yeah,
want to
thank
keep you
you.
too long. But that's amazing. I'm so hyped. This was such a great combo. There's so
We'll
much
have
to
to do
pull
it
from
again. Yeah.
here. Yeah, we got to get you back on the show maybe later this year when that campaign's going on or something to talk
For
about it.
sure.
That'd be a lot of fun. Anything you want to shout out, let people know of before we take off?
Check out The Forgotten Five, patreon.com/The Forgotten Five. Star Wars 10 is coming out. Dick Tracy 15, which was a conclusion of our last arc, just hit. I'm sure I'm forgetting something. Daredevil, Enemy of My Enemy hits on March 24th. So plenty of stuff to keep you busy if you only want to read stuff with my name on it. And you shouldn't, but there's a lot there for you. Thanks
I
again.
love it. Yeah, there is a lot there. Alex, thank you so much. Thank you to all of our watchers and listeners. Don't forget, we have the print shop episode 5 coming out tomorrow. Hit us up live on YouTube. Spilled Ink every Thursday night, our live drawing show. We're inking some pages this week, having a lot of fun. And we'll be back next week with another round of Inspired Ink. You all have a good night.
Thanks, guys.
And here comes the outro if I found my mouse there.
Print your comics with Comix Wellspring.